Terminator was an idea that I had when I was in Rome. I was just sitting around basically in my hotel room. I was in fact sick at the time. I had real high fever, and I just laying on the bed thinking, and came up with all this bizarre imagery. And I think also the idea that, you know, because I was in a foreign city by myself and I felt very sort of dissociated from humanity in general, it was very easy to project myself into these two characters from the future who were out of sync, out of time, out of place, you know, that sort of thing. I'd always wanted to do some sort of really definitive robot story, because it really, you know, it had really never been done. What did you think when you first got the script for T1? I mean, because they wanted you to read for the other guy, right? So you read it thinking about the other guy, or, you know, about Reese. Do you remember what you were thinking when you read it?
The more I read the script, the more I remember I got fascinated by the Terminator.
The bad guy.
The bad guy.
Right.
Which I thought was the real cool guy.
Your clothes. Give them to me.
What he loved was the story, and what he especially loved was everything that Terminator did.
We were talking about along the lines of me playing the heroic character.
Right, right. Because that's what I thought you were coming in for. And the funny thing was, when I went to that lunch, I didn't see that as you know, in the back of my mind, I was thinking the Terminator, you were thinking the Terminator, but we sit and we have this polite lunch because we've never met each other, and neither one of us mentions it, right? And then we both go back to our guys and say, Terminator, you know.
You then did something really smart. You sent over to my office your painting that you did of Terminator.
Right.
You impressed actually with my face on it.
Right.
And with the holding the 45 or like this across the chin like this. And I looked at this painting and I said, I am the Terminator. I'm gonna make this call now.
Right.
And I called Lou,
right.
My agent, right away, and I called you and I said, I want to play the Terminator.
Yeah.
And then the deal was made.
What changed was that the original concept as written, and the script didn't change at all, not a single line of dialogue was changed, but the visual concept was that the Terminator was this anonymous character who could walk out of a crowd, just one face in the crowd, could walk up and kill you for no apparent reason except for what your life would mean in some future time. And that concept changed because Arnold doesn't vanish into a crowd. It took on a slightly more hyperbolic visual style. It was a little larger than life. It still played sort of realistically, but it became more nightmarish, and you always knew he wasn't quite human. Obviously, in order to get the intensity on the face to make you a killer, there's a fine line with having you be completely blank. So, you know, there was some sense of emotion isn't really the right word, but intention, I think. The fact that you were a killer, I don't want to say predator, but a predatory creature in a way, and very focused on your goal.
Sarah Connor?
Yes?
We really narrowed it down to just if this would be a robot, what movement would there be going on? And it would literally only be the arm coming across, pulling out, cocking, shooting. No shoulder movement, no head movement. Goes back, and then the whole body would turn and would walk away.
But with a smoothness too.
Oh yeah,
it was like very positive and very smooth. Not jerky either, because jerkiness wastes energy.
Right.
It was like the ultimate efficiency, you know, to get, you know, the shortest path between 2 points. What I found to be effective, certainly on Terminator, was to do a slow motion build-up, or to subtly segue into slow motion where you almost don't realize it, and it becomes almost a dreamlike pace, or that dilation of time that you experience when you're in a traffic accident and it's happening and you can't stop it, and time seems to stretch. For me, the fun in that scene was the build-up. The latent tension of what is going to happen, knowing that one guy's armed, the other guy's armed, they're lurking around through the crowd, so all hell's going to break loose.
me if you want to live.
Remember the first day we shot the scene where you're driving through the parking garage in the police car that you've stolen, and you're looking for them. And on that first day we got together and we talked a little bit, and we worked out some physical behavior like a shark, you know, kind of the way it moves back and forth looking for prey. And then you came up with the idea of moving your eyes, then moving your head to follow the eyes, then moving the eyes back and moving the head back. So it became almost like a surveillance camera. And the funny thing was, it didn't really get real to me until the next morning in dailies. And I saw that close-up and I went, this is working great. Yeah. That nobody has ever seen this before.
I'll be back.
When writing I'll Be Back, I didn't think that that line would play funny at all, because you almost have to see the movie to know that he's coming through the door with the car. I figured that that would be a line for people who were seeing the film again, which obviously Terminator is one of those movies that people see over and over, so it works like that. But you know what? It worked even when people hadn't seen the movie before, because they could just guess what your version of coming back was going to be. You know what I mean? By that point, they were in sync with the picture, and the picture was working. In the first picture, you were so enthusiastic about the character and about the work. I mean, as you are in all your films, but I hadn't worked with you before, so I wasn't ready for this. That you just jumped in. I mean, there was stuff where we had you tied to the top of a car, holding on while the car raced backward down the alley with your arm on fire.
I think the worst moments were not really when I had to do something physically, like, you know, running through a window, or falling through a window, or landing on glass, or something like that, or being on top of a car. It was more the acid that was poured on me to make me smoke, to make the character smoke. I remember
That's true. We did pour acid on you.
I kept saying, is there no other way?
Mild acid. It's a very mild acid.
Yeah, very mild. Is there no way that we can just put some smoke in there somewhere in the clothes that I can smoke, rather than having acid being poured on? With fire and acid and those kind of things, you never know.
Well, you know when that stuff starts to get around the face.
Exactly, too much, or in the eyes, you know, it burns a little bit.
I think that there was one major decision that was made that everything else sort of devolved from, which was made jointly between myself and Stan Winston when I approached him to do the you know, the makeup and prosthetic effects on the film. And that decision was to not do a man in a suit. We had to sell the idea that this was the suit that was inside the man.
All I remember was that I walked into Stan Winston's office, his building where he designed all the everything, you know, the Terminator look. After you got through prepping him what it should look like, noticed, and he started making drawings and the makeup and design, all this stuff. I remember walking in one time, and he said to me, "This is what you're going to look like." And I looked at this, and I did not think it was humanly possible to create this kind of a makeup. With the cheekbones
sticking out.
I mean, there was mechanism underneath. The hydraulic mechanism underneath the cheeks. And when the meat is ripped off, when the teeth are sticking out on the side, when the mouth is gone, when the artificial eye, I mean, that lens is exposed and lights up red and all this stuff. When I saw that, I said to myself, that's impossible to do. And he looked at me, and when I told him that, he said to me, "It's possible, Arnold, but it would take hours and hours and hours and a lot of your patience."
Get out.
I tried to structure a script in such a way that it was not too highfalutin budget-wise. The executive producer begged us to write more of the scenes as daytime because of the perceived cost difference. But, you know, I plunged madly on. It seemed so important stylistically to keep the film a night film as much as possible. And so we kept it that way. And I don't think it really impacted the cost all that much.
The first one was really a struggle, especially when it came to makeup, like you said, because there wasn't that much time available and that much money available.
Right, exactly. In fact, probably toward the end we didn't even have anybody to put it on. It was, here, Arnold, put this on.
I know. We were going out on our own, shooting quickly a scene. Remember punching into the window?
We went out and stole shots. At the end, remember, we got a crew of like 3 people together and went out and did some close-ups of you.
You held the camera.
Yeah.
I had to put the special thing on it and take on my gloves, put my clothes on. There was no one from wardrobe there.
Right.
I had my clothes in the back in the trunk of the car, pulled it out, I put on the jacket of Terminator, and you said, quickly, quickly, before the police comes, walk across the street and just punch in the window. And then I say, okay, we're looking left and right. I put on the glove quickly, you know, and I put the gray jacket on and all this stuff.
Yeah, right.
And then you said, you went like this, and it was standing there with the camera behind the car.
Right.
I went over there, boom.
Yeah.
You know, says, okay, let's move on to the next location. This worked.
What was funny is that all of that, you know, kind of scrambling around to do that, it didn't occur to you to ask me, what do you mean punch in the window?
I know.
What do you mean punch in a glass window? Exactly. It's just like, do it, you know.
You still don't get it, do you? He'll find her. That's what he does. That's all he does!
And the other thing that's real important to me in a film is subjectivity, getting the audience to see what's happening the way the character sees it, as opposed to the way sort of sitting outside. And I like to try to, you know, force you to see it and feel it more the way they do within the frame. You can't step in there with them, but you know, hopefully the next best thing. It was primarily an aesthetic decision in the writing, which was to show these nightmarish glimpses as they were perceived subjectively by this character Reese, and then to take that and juxtapose it back and forth with you know, Sarah Connor and her sort of very normal, almost mundane life.
When you were casting, especially the female lead, which then became Linda Hamilton's part, I remember you were very interested in finding someone that fits a certain specification, a certain woman, and I think that's interesting. You were telling me that what you were looking for.
Are you saying it's from the future?
One possible future.
Then you're from the future too, is that right?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that we cast Linda, and she was right for the first picture, and she wasn't she had to have some strength, but when you first saw her, she had to seem to be kind of an everyday person and vulnerable, and the kind of person who was really almost a victim in a way.
Right.
And at the end, that strength emerges.
Move it, Reese! On your feet, soldier! On your feet!
First, she was this soft, nice, feminine girl that was working there in this restaurant.
Right.
And, you know, just having a great time, being one of those young girls that was out there having a good time. And then, as she became the victim, and as time went on and she realized what her mission was, she became harder and harder.
Exactly.
And at the end, she was really tough. You really got the feeling this woman has changed, and she's ready to take on this challenge.
You're terminated.
Michael Biehn obviously did a fabulous job with Reese.
There is a funny anecdote there, which is that Michael came in to read for us, and he gave the best reading of any of the actors that we'd seen, but it was with a Southern accent, we talked to his agent, very politely said, you know, Michael's very good, but we really don't want him to seem so specific that he comes from the South, because you know, he's from the future. We don't want it to be that specific. And the agent said, what accent? He doesn't have a Southern accent. It turned out that he'd been reading for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof the morning, you know, that morning of the reading, and he hadn't shaken the accent.
Sarah.
No.
Run!
So he gave another great reading, minus the accent, and that's when we cast him.
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
I always felt that this was more than the ordinary action film.
Right.
And it was more than a special effects film, and or like what some thought was just a B movie, and that it is only appealing to the kids between 14 and 18. This is not to be looked at as just a limited audience, a movie for limited audience, but in fact, I think the story is so solid and so good, and it has so many interesting messages there, and it is also entertaining, and so that it would have a broad appeal, that it would have an appeal for the women, it would have something for the older folks. It was just something that had something in there for everyone, and I think because of that, there was, after the movie was gone from the theaters, then when it came on television, it was 10 times as big, the ratings and how many people saw it. And then when the video came out, it was like a mushrooming effect there. And I think that's what eventually led to the belief that we must do a second Terminator.
It's funny that every year that went by that we didn't make the sequel, the demand for the sequel got greater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why you and I, we got together periodically and started working on a plan and mapping out times to keep a certain time period blocked out so we can go and eventually down the line.
Actually, you'd call me up about once every 6 months and say, so how's it going on? No, you'd talk about other things for about 5 minutes and then, so how's Terminator 2 going?
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, anyway, so that was, we were fortunate enough that it did come together and that we did make a second Terminator.
What did he just say?
He said there's a storm coming in.
I know.
Terminator 1 was like a hallucination for me. I was making my first picture. I had no idea it was really going to be a success. I mean, when I wrote it, I probably thought it stood the chance of being a success. I wrote it that way on purpose, you know, but you never really believe that it's going to happen or that it can happen. And so everything after that was like a dream for me for a while. And then I realized, yes, it did happen. This really did find its audience. And it gave me a lot of courage as a filmmaker to go on and do other stuff.
I felt right from the beginning when I read the script and when I had my meeting with Jim Cameron that it was a winner. I felt it all the way through the shooting of the movie. Every time we prepared for a stunt, every time we did a scene, I was more and more convinced that we had a winner in our hands. And then when Jim showed me, after the shooting was completed, he showed to me some of the edited footage. And when I saw that, it was so intense and it was so well done that I just couldn't get enough of it. And it was really one of the first times that I could see rough cuts of a film and wanted to see more and more of it. So I believed all along that it's going to go through the roof. I was hoping and praying that the studio would believe the same thing and would support it 100%. And so I knew I was sitting on a gold mine.
We did it, Kyle. We got it.
In 1984, film audiences were introduced to a new kind of villain.
You're terminated.
7 years later, writer-director James Cameron has re-teamed with stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton for the long-awaited sequel, Terminator II, Judgment Day.
If it is little children today or grown-ups, the one line that everyone always asks me to say is, say, I'll be back. Say that line. Come on now.
Are you gonna be back or what?
I'm a cybernetic organism. Cyberdyne Systems Model 101. be back.
Those words took on new meaning in the fall of 1990 when cast and crew reunited in the Mojave Desert to continue the story of Sarah Connor and her fight against the machines of the future.
The important element that's changed in her life since we saw her last is that she's had her son, John Connor, and he's now 10 years old. The new Terminator of the film is not targeted on her anymore. The child now himself is the target. Okay.
For Cameron, Terminator II was only a matter of time.
Action! It was inevitable that a Terminator sequel would get made, and I wanted to be at the helm. I wanted to make sure it didn't kind of drift off the concept of what it should be about.
Cameron's vision of a killer cyborg from the future hit a chord with audiences worldwide.
The Terminator represented something to people, a kind of a dark side of the human psyche. People want to have that fantasy of being able to do exactly what they wanted to do whenever they wanted to do it.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
You forgot to say please.
It took us all, I think, a while to realize that the Terminator had kind of permeated into the culture, and it just kept getting reflected back to me in so many ways.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator.
Arnold was always a very strong force in trying to get the sequel made.
I've said to Jim Cameron, I said, you know, we should have an ongoing story because we're dealing here with such an interesting subject.
I knew, instinct told me that based on the strength of the first film, that there would be another one. It's just, you're never ready.
Several of the original Terminator crew returned for the sequel, including director of photography Adam Greenberg and Terminator effects creator Stan Winston.
Sequel must be true to the first film, but yet it must be more than the first film. We have to give them what they got in the first, and we have to give them something new and fresh. And I think that's what we've done in Terminator 2.
How can Arnold be starring in the sequel?
A Terminator is built in a factory, and there's one after another, and they all look like Arnold. I guess it's just because he's cute.
This Terminator, however, isn't just another pretty face.
There's more sophistication to the way it will look, and bigger, much bigger things will happen on the screen.
Action! Action, Arnold! CO2!
For 6 months, Terminator 2 combined the efforts of over 1,000 filmmakers, shooting day and night throughout the state of California to capture the many action sequences of the script. The production actually changed the course of a river to shoot high-speed chases in the extensive flood control channels of Los Angeles.
Roll, guys, roll!
The tight quarters and massive filming equipment often paralleled the action of the scenes being shot. A defunct steel mill was resurrected by the filmmakers, recreating the intense heat and light of molten steel. Ironically, actual temperatures in the mill averaged 42 degrees, making it difficult for the actors to work up a sweat. And in Northern California, a team of expert pyrotechnicians staged one of the largest police shootouts in cinematic history.
And action, Arnold!
Arnold, tell me that wasn't a rush.
Their crowning achievement, however, was blowing up a 4-story office building.
Were we supposed to roll? That was a rehearsal. I was waiting for your cue, Jim.
Arnold and I working together, it's just like it was on the first picture. He's one of the most professional people I've ever worked with. He has incredible concentration. He takes physical direction like no actor I've ever worked with. And it's really a joy to work with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Really part of the shoot.
It was before my method acting seminar. Although then, in 1984, he paid a lot of attention to the acting, he pays much more attention to the acting now, the way he goes about directing actors, how much time he spends with rehearsals, how much time he spends with perfection and with moves and gestures.
I think you both go, and then freeze.
So I would say that in that area he's much smarter and much more sophisticated. I mean, he wants to do basically everything because he has such a clear vision of what he wants to see, and see him ending up running with the smoke machine and creating smoke in front of the camera and then putting on blood and trying to do your makeup. That's why people always say that a Jim Cameron movie has a certain look, because it's a total representation of what he wants to see.
Long before the cameras roll, Cameron and crew are hard at work, designing sequences and testing ideas in a unique mix of filmmaking and science.
I do a lot of visual research, I do a lot of technical research. The more fantastic the subject, the more realistic the situation needs to be.
Using extremely detailed models, Cameron designed sequences with the aid of a thumb-sized video camera. By blocking the scene in miniature, production designer Joe Nemec can alter a location or set to meet the specific needs of the scene. Also during pre-production, an ex-Israeli commando provided the cast with military combat and weapons training. Since the character of Sarah has become an expert marksman, Linda was required to master a variety of guns and assault rifles.
It was really like entering the military and learning the mindset and coming up against myself in a big way. That was even more significant in terms of playing Sarah.
Very good.
She is so set herself down a path, a concentrated path of duty, that she's lost all touch with her son.
You cannot risk yourself, even for me. Do you understand? You're too important.
She's a great warrior, but for what? You know, so what? She doesn't have anything that makes it worthwhile, you know. And also, my life. It's like, oh, we don't even notice the gunshot anymore.
Why does it want me?
It was a nuclear war.
Sarah has lived with the certain knowledge of the destruction of the world on a certain date for so long, and it haunts her dreams and nightmares every night, and it's driven her kind of to the point of madness, really, as it would anybody who really had to confront that knowledge.
Because I knew it happened! It happened!
We experience the end of the world through Sarah's eyes, a process that called for the strictest sense of realism. But even more powerful and haunting are Sarah's visions of the people.
And he comes down, and action, he jumps off and covers up. Oh, stop. What'd you do? See Commando 10 times?
When we had to create ashen bodies that were going to be blown away by a nuclear holocaust, it was very unsettling. And it was the one time when you got a little uncomfortable because it wasn't pleasant to look at while you were shooting it. But it is the important aspect of the film.
Judgment Day, the day Sarah was told the war would start, clearing the path for humanity's successor. The machines. Future War. For Terminator II, Cameron mobilized an army of actors, stunt people, and special effects crews to create the final battle between humanity and the machines. This battle took place on many levels in Terminator 2, as the crew executed one successful vehicle stunt after another.
That is a cut. That is a cut.
One scene required the Terminator to climb from a speeding pickup onto a heavy tanker, a feat performed by Arnold's stunt double, Peter Kent. After a successful spin-out, the truck was rolled onto its side and dragged by a team of tractors. Peter rode the sliding tanker like a surfboard. To protect young John Connor, the human resistance has sent the Terminator itself.
My mission is to protect you.
Who sent you?
You did.
This is deep.
Playing the role of young John Connor is newcomer Eddie Furlong.
It's almost in a way the classic story. I mean, he literally was just plucked off the streets of Pasadena and whipped into the vortex of making a movie.
And Jim said, Eddie, I was going to tell you Friday, but don't tell anybody. But we picked you for this film. And I felt like hugging Jim, but he's a guy, so I didn't hug him.
Cast with less than a month before production, Eddie began an intense period of preparation. In addition to his regular education, he received physical training, acting lessons, and motorcycle classes.
Funny thing is, I'm sure it's nothing like anything he ever expected, and it's a total left turn in his life. But on the other hand, children have this remarkable capacity to just deal with things, whatever life throws them. They don't know how the world is supposed to be yet, so they just think that's okay. You know, it can be like this if it wants to be.
One of the many tasks Stan Winston and crew undertook was enhancing the original Terminator makeup design.
Originally, there were a number of stages designed or considered as Arnold stages in makeups for this particular production. An actor must know going into a situation like this that there is physical stress with this process. Fortunately, Arnold Schwarzenegger is a pro.
3 more hours of this. I don't know how much longer I can take this.
He attacks it as a pro. He doesn't complain.
All right. But I need my foot massages, my oatmeal, my Austrian Christmas music. I need it all. Go ahead. Do it.
This pre-made up piece here is going to be glued to Arnold's face with the help of Arnold holding it.
Hold on a second. Okay, now.
It's the glue we use. It makes these arms pop up and get all swollen. On days when the makeup doesn't turn out 100%, I just sneak by the camera and rub a little Vaseline on the lens, and then everything looks fine. But don't tell the DP that. He gets really upset.
This was so funny.
During the production, makeup artist Jeff Don and Steve Laporte and hairdresser Peter Tothball would transform Arnold into the flesh-covered Terminator an estimated 35 times, totaling 6 consecutive days in a makeup chair for Arnold.
Not too much, because if you put too much blood on it, it doesn't. You can't see the work that's been done. You can't see the metal and the flesh that's gone. It just looks like a big bloody mess, like you slap some hamburger on it.
That's a good example, Jeff.
Hamburger?
I'm proud of you.
Well, I'm hungry right now, so I thought I'd use hamburger.
People accept this possibility that there can be a blend between a human component and a machine component. And I think it's just an aspect of our lives right now that we're so surrounded by machines all the time. And the fact that we can accept that, to me, is the most amazing thing of all.
What it is I'm too handsome. No camera can take all these good looks. So what they do in every movie basically is they put appliances on and terrible makeup on to kind of tone my looks down a little bit, so I match up to the rest of the actors in the movie.
So tell me, Linda, what do you think?
I'm a little too pretty too for this movie, so.
All right. Wow! Was my breath that bad? 2.5, 3 hours, and he's done. The next stage for the makeup is stage 5, 6, 7, and it's basically the same that Arnold had before, just more chrome, more appliances. He'll have his eye plugged up, so he won't be able to see out of it. And it'll take probably an hour, hour and a half longer to put on. He's gonna love it.
As one might imagine, Sarah has trouble accepting the Terminator as an ally.
Although she doesn't know that he's going to come back, she knows that it's a possibility, so she's ready. No affection. You know, I've kept it really clean.
Do you know what you're doing?
I've detailed files on the human anatomy.
I bet. Makes you a more efficient killer, right?
Correct. Terminator in this film adopts certain human characteristics.
You gotta listen to the way people talk. If someone comes up to you with an attitude, you say, hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, baby. That character slowly develops by the very fact of hanging around a human being.
Jesus, you were gonna kill that guy.
Of course, I'm a Terminator.
Listen to me very carefully, okay? You're not a Terminator anymore, all right?
And all that registers, and I start dealing with all those kind of emotions.
The Terminator sent to kill young John is unlike any killing machine ever imagined.
I call him a mimetic polyalloy, meaning that he's made of a substance that can imitate anything.
Playing the T-1000 is Robert Patrick.
Jim was looking for somebody that was sort of a mixture between the Protector character, which was Michael Biehn in the first, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is the Terminator. And I think he was looking for somebody that could look like he could possibly just be a human, and yet could be a Terminator, could handle the intensity to be a Terminator.
Well, I wanted to find someone who would be a good contrast to Arnold. If the 800 series is a kind of human Panzer tank, then the 1000 series had to be a Porsche, an advanced prototype Terminator who was more fearsome than the old model. The thing I like about Robert was he kind of looks like a cat in a way. It's almost like it's about senses with him. You know, you feel that he's very in touch with the world and analyzing it and observing it.
My character wants to completely take out John Connor. That's his mission. A relentless, tenacious killing machine, and he won't stop.
Though their missions are exact opposites, both Terminators stem from the same creator, the unseen supercomputer called Skynet.
So it's like this is the first time you've had to deal with evil, because Terminators don't fight Terminators. Right. It's never happened before.
We stem from the same technology, so we've got to have some like programming there. Are you the legal guardian of John Connor?
That's right, officer. What's he done now?
So we're both killing machines, we're just different types.
There was a guy here this morning looking for him, too.
Yeah, a big guy on a bike. Does that got something to do with this?
The new Terminator, really, with his new capabilities, is much more threatening.
Now I'm basically death. You know, they're running from death.
Both Terminators are programmed to complete their missions at all costs and without question. But Sarah has decided to confront her destiny and takes matters into her own hands.
I need to know how Skynet gets built. Who's responsible?
The man most directly responsible is Miles Bennett Dyson.
She decides that the only way to stop the future that she knows is going to happen is to kill the man that builds the chip that starts the war.
In a very real way, she becomes the Terminator of the second film, at least at a kind of a psychological level.
For cast and crew, Terminator 2 has been more than a reunion.
Has been very intense to work, and you know, a lot of night shooting and a lot of long hours and so on.
Did you see that? Did you see that?
Oh, he's just a whip away because he's embarrassed.
And I'm very honored and happy that I'm able to do the second one.
In 1984, Cameron transformed Arnold into one of the screen's most memorable villains. 7 years later, the process is reversing itself. The Terminator is becoming a protector.
Ultimately, the film is about the value of human life. No matter how inconsequential you may seem to others or even to yourself, your individual existence may have great value in the future.
Grab it, go! Go!
They have a job to do, protect her son, and they do it.
One of the most amazing aspects of Terminator 2 is that it's taken the art and science of special effects to an entirely new level. Several Academy Award-winning effects companies worked under a strict veil of secrecy for almost a year to create the many and varied effects of Terminator 2. Fantasy II, under the command of Terminator veteran Gene Warren, greatly expanded the future war sequences from the first film. Combining live-action combat sequences with effects photography, artists created the massive battlefield for the war between man and machine. The famous endoskeleton also returns for the sequel. Stan Winston's company joined forces with stop-motion animator Peter Kleinow to create an army of these high-tech death figures.
It's the same endoskeleton. Basically the same design. We have finessed it, but it's much more technically advanced than the endoskeleton in the first movie. It's actually artistically advanced. They can do more. There's more life to these endoskeletons.
But redesigning the original endoskeleton was only the beginning for Stan Winston and staff.
In this particular movie, we had to duplicate every principal actor animatronically.
In the scene where the Terminator must force his way past a SWAT firing squad, Stan was called upon to create an Arnold double that could withstand a barrage of gunfire.
There's nothing that we can do that will actually duplicate living things. We can come close, but we can't do it exactly.
It's incredible, huh?
It's looking good. It's looking good. For this, consider the fact that it's going to be good shots. It'll only be on because we are making animatronic duplications of living things. 2, 3, 4. Perfect.
Lighten up.
Very nice.
It's just a movie. What? Okay, you don't get paid. So what? I make it for you, okay? Relax.
For Sarah's nightmare, Winston's crew designed and created several duplicates of Linda Hamilton, all of which were destroyed in the creation of the haunting nuclear sequence. Destroying Los Angeles was a task given to Forward Productions under the direction of Bob Skotak. Vast miniature cityscapes were built in tremendous detail for the sole purpose of their destruction. But the truly revolutionary effects involved creating the T-1000, the deadliest machine ever built.
It just blew my mind to actually see it, and you go, wow, they've morphed you. You're a liquid mercury man. You're liquid chrome. I don't think I'll get over it, and I totally believed it.
Creating the T-1000 required the combined efforts of Stan Winston's company and Industrial Light and Magic, under the direction of Dennis Muren.
At the beginning of this show, Jim had the boards already done, and you have to start with storyboards. You have to know what you're doing at the beginning. Can it even be done? A show like this, is it technically feasible to even do it now? And Jim was hoping it was, and I thought it was, so we all agreed that we could do it.
It was a constant, little juggling act in the very beginning to figure out what was going to be done optically, what was going to be done as a real-life effect, and then what things from us would be needed for ILM to help them work things out optically, and vice versa. And it was, it just worked out as perfect as it possibly could have.
When the T-1000's abilities went beyond what was possible with animatronics, makeup, and prosthetics, ILM was given the task of creating the effects optically, literally redefining state-of-the-art for computer animation.
Computer-generated images are a way of coming up with new effects, especially when we've been doing traditional effects for 80 years. And you're starting to see, I think, a lot of sort of the limits of traditional effects, sort of the, it's very hard to use the same tools and do the different things all the time.
Dennis and I sat down and conceived the process, and we sort of decided to concentrate on the Robert Patrick form, because Robert is the T-1000. We decided we're going to study his body, we're going to watch his movements, we're going to find a way to capture his quality, the way he walks, the way he runs, the way he behaves, the way his body changes shape. And that was, for us, was going to be the key that drove our visual approach to the whole T-1000.
At the making of the models, the studying Robert Patrick, we got Robert, and he was up here, and we painted a grid on him and shot a lot of footage of him, and we could see how the grid moved as his muscles moved and his bodies moved around. That was way back in the beginning of the show.
And so that gives you an extremely powerful guide for creating a real Robert Patrick walk, a real Robert Patrick run, which is in fact the T1000 walk, the T1000 run. So it's absolutely critical to our whole process.
We're trying to always duplicate human beings. Everybody's shooting for human beings. This is really the first successful step to adding real life to an otherwise inanimate piece of geometry. You know, it's the wrinkles, you know, it's the slight mannerisms of the eyes and the hands and stuff, just like a real human. That's the kind of thing, that's the extra step we wanted to take. We were destined to do that or nothing. We knew that other people had come so far, we wanted to go beyond that.
I dabbled in this a little bit in The Abyss with the water tentacle that formed the faces of Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. And that proved to be very compelling imagery that people remembered indelibly from that movie. So that kind of encouraged me to take it a step further, or many steps further.
As on The Abyss, ILM employed a revolutionary laser scanning process to capture Robert Patrick's movements and form.
And one of the most powerful ways, or one of the most exciting ways to use it, is to get people's facial expressions in the computer.
I'm sitting in a chair, you know, like this, and I can't move this way, I can't move this way. I've got to stay totally controlled, hit this emotion, and lock on this expression, you know, like,
We can reconstruct the actor's face. It's a very free process. You can sort of go with what's happening and digitize those expressions as you wish. And we can immediately work with them, animate, model, create human, very realistic, very strong human faces.
Get out.
I mean, we work on this stuff, and every day, you know, we still have not lost the spirit of amazement when we see what's coming out.
It's new, and that's what's necessary, is we can't have a sequel and just have it more of the same. There's some wonderful new surprises in Terminator 2.
Bringing the T1000 to life has been a group effort. I knew I was in good hands, like with ILM and Stan Winston. I knew I was working with the best of the best, and I'd just like to thank them and the crew and my cast members.
Terminator was heralded as the science fiction film of the decade. 7 years later, stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton and visionary director James Cameron have created one of the largest movies ever, the conclusion of the Terminator saga. For cast and crew, Terminator 2 was nothing short of destiny.
Hasta la vista, baby.